My parents tried to control my marriage for money, so I cut ties entirely, and their perfect social image collapsed overnight without me. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I've done everything to make my parents proud, or at least I tried to. My parents built their entire existence around one thing: reputation. To the outside world, we were the perfect family. My father, a respected businessman; my mother, the social butterfly who chaired every charity event. Our family photos looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine: pressed smiles, matching outfits, and a silence that screamed, "Don't ruin this image." From as early as I can remember, my choices were never really mine. When I picked my college, my mother said, "Business administration looks more respectable than journalism." When I chose my first job offer, my father reminded me this company has a better name. People will talk. Even the clothes I wore were a family discussion. My mom ironing my shirts before interviews, whispering, "Remember, we represent more than just ourselves." And I believed them. I honestly did. I told myself their control was care, that they were just guiding me to success. Every suggestion felt like a burden disguised as love. I learned to measure worth in approval. If my father nodded once during dinner, I felt accomplished. If my mother posted about me on Facebook, it was validation. But there was always this quiet part of me that wondered, what if I stopped performing? Would they still love me, or would I just become an embarrassment they'd rather hide? That thought started haunting me the year I met Maya. She wasn't from the same kind of family. No fancy events. No constant need for validation. She laughed too loud, dressed how she wanted, and actually listened when I spoke. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. But the moment I introduced her to my parents, I saw it. That flicker of disapproval behind their polite smiles. I didn't know it then, but that tiny spark of rebellion, choosing love over their image, would ignite everything that followed. I still remember the first time I saw Maya. She was standing outside a small art cafe. Hair tied back, sketchbook in hand, sunlight spilling over her face. She wasn't the kind of woman who tried to impress anyone, and maybe that's what drew me in. There was something free about her, unfiltered, real. We started talking about movies and music, and by the time our coffee turned cold, I realized I'd just spent 2 hours being my truest self. No performance, no pressure, just me. Over the next few months, she became my safe place. We'd sit in her tiny apartment, surrounded by unfinished paintings and secondhand furniture, and she'd tease me about my corporate robot life. I'd laugh, but inside, her words hit deeper than she knew. With her, I wasn't the perfect son. I was human, flawed, funny, sometimes exhausted, but finally alive. When I told my parents about her, my mom smiled too quickly, the kind of smile she gives before delivering bad news. "That's nice," she said, voice tight. "What does her family do?" My dad didn't even look up from his laptop. "You're serious about her?" he asked flatly, as if I'd confessed to quitting my job. The first dinner was a disaster wrapped in fake politeness. My mother asked Maya if she'd considered going back to school. While my father offered career advice that sounded more like criticism, Maya stayed graceful, but I saw her eyes harden by the end of the night, when we got back to her place. She said quietly, "They don't like me, do they?" I tried to defend them, muttering something about just needing time. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about time. It was about control. And for the first time in my life, I was starting to care less about their approval, and more about what it would cost me to keep chasing it. After that dinner, things got weird. My parents didn't outright forbid me from seeing Maya. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they wrapped their disapproval in layers of concern. My mother would call me late at night, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "Sweetheart, we're just worried. You've worked so hard to build a future. Do you really think she understands your world?" My father, ever the strategist, approached it differently. "It's not about her son," he'd say over breakfast. "It's about compatibility. Long-term stability. A marriage isn't built on feelings. It's built on foundations." He'd emphasize that last word like he was teaching me a business principle. I told myself they were just being protective. That's what good parents do, right? But it started to feel less like protection and more like manipulation. Every concern came with a subtle dig about Maya's modest upbringing, her lack of connections, even her clothes. My mother once sighed, "She's sweet, but she doesn't exactly fit our circle." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Maya noticed my growing tension. One night, she said softly, "They don't have to like me, but they shouldn't make you feel ashamed for loving me." Her words hit something deep, because that's exactly what was happening. Shame, quiet and corrosive, eating away at everything I believed about love and loyalty. I started avoiding family dinners, which only made things worse. My mother cried about how I was pulling away. My father accused me of being influenced. They turned my desire for independence into proof of betrayal. And still, I tried to please both sides to balance the love that gave me freedom and the love that chained me. But you can't serve two masters forever, and I was about to find out just how far they'd go to make me choose. After months of tension, I decided I couldn't keep living in the middle. I loved Maya, and I wasn't going to let fear or family pride decide my future. So, one quiet evening, I proposed in her art studio, surrounded by her half-finished canvases and the smell of paint thinner. She cried, said yes, and for the first time in years, I felt like my life was truly mine. But the joy didn't last long. The moment I told my parents, their smiles froze like glass. "Oh, so soon," my mother said, clasping her hands too tightly. My father cleared his throat. "Well, if we're doing this, we should do it properly." That's how our intimate celebration turned into a 100-person engagement party at a high-end venue I never wanted from the start. It wasn't about us. My parents took control guest lists, decorations, even the speeches. My mother fussed over what Maya would wear, subtly suggesting designers to help her look more polished. Maya refused, choosing a simple cream dress that reflected her personality, not my parents' ego that night. Under glittering chandeliers and polite laughter, I watched my mother introduce Maya to guests as if she were a new business acquisition. My father gave a speech about merging values and preserving family legacy. The words made my stomach twist. It was supposed to be a moment about love, not leverage. Then came the final humiliation. When Maya reached for a dessert, my mother laughed lightly and said, "Careful, dear, cameras are everywhere." A few guests chuckled. Maya froze, cheeks flushing red. I wanted to disappear. After everyone left, she looked at me and said quietly, "This wasn't our engagement party. It was their press conference." I didn't know what to say because she was right, and deep down, I realized something terrifying. My parents didn't see our future as a marriage. They saw it as an investment they wanted to own. A week after the engagement party, my father invited me to his office. Not the living room, not a cafe, but his office. That alone told me it wasn't going to be a heart-to-heart. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, motioned for me to sit, and said, "Son, let's talk about securing your future." He started by congratulating me again, praising Maya in vague terms that didn't sound genuine. Then he slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents, a property deed, bank details, and a neatly typed marital financial agreement. He said he wanted to gift us a house and fund the wedding entirely. "You shouldn't have to worry about finances starting out," he said smoothly, but as I skimmed the papers, my stomach turned. Hidden in the fine print were clauses tying the house under a joint family trust with my father as the co-signatory. The prenup section stated that family assets, meaning their money, could be managed on our behalf to prevent misuse. It wasn't a gift. It was a lishta. I looked up at him, speechless. He smiled, that same tight smile he used in business meetings. It's standard procedure. "You'll thank me later." When I told Maya, she didn't even hesitate. "Don't sign it," she said firmly. "If you let them own your life now, they'll never stop." She wasn't angry, just heartbroken that it had come to this that night. I sat in my car outside their house for over an hour, staring at those papers. My father's words kept echoing. "You'll thank me later," but gratitude was the last thing I felt. For the first time, I realized my parents didn't trust me to build my own future. They wanted to control it, and that's when I started to wonder what else they'd already done behind my back. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. Only a few days after that tense conversation with my father, a family friend, Mr. Shah, invited me out for lunch. He'd known my parents for years, someone I grew up calling uncle, and he looked uneasy the moment I sat down. "Son," he said, lowering his voice, "I shouldn't be telling you this, but you deserve to know." He told me that my parents had approached Maya's family weeks before the engagement party. They offered to help with wedding costs and even proposed to cover Maya's parents' remaining home loan in exchange for one thing after the wedding. Maya's parents were to respect family boundaries and avoid interfering in financial matters. Translation: my parents were trying to buy silence and control both families at once. I felt my hands go cold. Every act of generosity suddenly made sense. The house, the lawyer, the perfect image. They weren't trying to welcome Maya, they were trying to own her. That night, I confronted my parents. My mother tried to play innocent at first. "We were just helping them," she said, clutching her pearls like a victim in a soap opera. My father didn't bother denying it. "You're naive," he said sharply. "Marriage isn't just about love, it's about alignment. You can't tie your life to someone without ensuring stability." By controlling her family, I snapped. By bribing them into silence, he glared at me, jaw tight. "Watch your tone. We're doing what's necessary to protect you and us." That word "us" echoed in my head long after I left. There was no me in that equation. I was just an extension of their brand, their social equity, their legacy. Driving home, I couldn't stop shaking. Maya listened quietly as I told her everything. When I finished, she just said, "They don't see you as their son anymore. They see you as an asset they're losing control over." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about love anymore. It was a war for ownership of my life. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. For years, I had brushed off their behavior as just how they are. But now, I couldn't unsee it. Every decision they'd made for me wasn't about love. It was about keeping their power intact. I drove to their house that afternoon, rehearsing what I'd say the entire way there. When I arrived, my mother was arranging flowers in the living room. She looked up, smiling like nothing was wrong. "You should have called first," she said. My father was in his study, pretending to be busy. I didn't sit down. "I know what you did," I said. "You went behind my back to buy off Maya's parents." The room went silent. My mother froze mid-motion, petals falling from her hands. My father sighed, not the sigh of guilt, but of irritation. "You're overreacting," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We did what any sensible parents would do. By manipulating people." I asked, voice trembling. "By treating my fiancé like some transaction." My mother suddenly started crying, the kind of cry she'd perfected, soft sobs, trembling voice. "We just want the best for you," she whispered. "She's changing you. Can't you see that?" I looked between them, my mother weaponizing guilt, my father using control, and something inside me finally cracked. "No," I said quietly, "you just can't stand not being in control." My father stood up, his voice rising. "Watch your mouth, boy. Don't forget who made you what you are." I took a deep breath. "I know exactly who made me what I am," I said, my voice breaking. "And that's why I'm leaving, before I become just like you." My mother gasped. My father's face turned red with anger, but I didn't wait for another word. I walked out, their voices echoing behind me, curses a lifetime of control collapsing in a single step. That night, sitting alone in my car outside Maya's apartment, I realized I'd finally done it. ID broken free. But freedom, I would soon learn, comes with its own kind of loneliness. The days after I walked out were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, no slammed doors or screaming matches. Just silence, the kind that feels too heavy to be peace. For a while, I convinced myself it was over, that they'd finally accepted my decision. But I should have known better. My parents didn't fight loudly. They fought strategically. It started subtly. A coworker mentioned my mother had called her, asking if I was doing okay since the engagement. Then an old family friend texted me, saying, "Your mom's really worried. She says Maya's changed you." Within a week, whispers had turned into rumors. People in our community started looking at me differently, some with pity, others with judgment. My parents were rewriting the narrative, their perfect son. Brainwashed by a manipulative woman from a less stable family. At first, I tried to ignore it. Maya and I focused on our wedding plans, pretending the outside world didn't exist. But every time I opened social media, I'd see posts from my mother about losing children to bad influences, or my father giving interviews about the decline of family values. It wasn't just emotional blackmail. Anymore, it was character assassination, masked as grief. One night, I broke down, Maybe I should just go talk to them, I muttered. Maya took my hand, eyes tired but steady. You don't owe them your sanity, she said. They're punishing you for not being their puppet. Her words were meant to comfort me, but they hurt because they were true. I felt torn in half, one side wanting to protect the peace I'd finally found, the other haunted by the guilt they'd engraved into me since childhood. That's when my phone buzzed, a message from my mother. You'll regret this when we're gone. It wasn't a plea, it was a threat wrapped in heartbreak. And reading it, I realized the war wasn't over. It had just gone silent. Weeks turned into months, and their silence became a weapon. I didn't hear from them directly anymore, but their presence lingered like a shadow over everything I did. Friends I'd known for years started avoiding me. Relatives stopped replying to my messages, and every time I visited the old neighborhood, conversations fell quiet the moment I entered a room. My parents hadn't just cut me off, they'd erased me from their version of reality. Then one afternoon, I got a call from my cousin Amir. His tone was hesitant. Hey, you might want to see this. He sent me a link to a local charity event, the kind my parents always hosted. The video opened with my father at a podium talking about the sacrifices good parents make for their ungrateful children. My mother sat beside him, tears in her eyes, shaking her head like she'd lost something irreplaceable. The crowd murmured sympathetically, applauding her strength. I watched the entire thing in disbelief. They were publicly painting themselves as victims, the loving parents abandoned by their selfish son and his opportunistic fiancée. I felt my throat close. Maya walked in, saw the video, and didn't say a word for a long time. Then she turned to me and whispered, "They don't miss you. They missed the control you gave them." It hit me like a punch to the chest. For years, I'd believed I was the glue holding our family together. But maybe I'd just been the mirror that made them look good. Without me reflecting their perfect image, their illusion cracked, and instead of facing it, they'd chosen to destroy me in people's eyes. That night, I sat on the balcony staring into the city lights. Realizing the truth, I wasn't losing my family. I was finally seeing who they really were. And that clarity, it burned away the last trace of guilt I had left. The morning after that video surfaced, I woke up with a heaviness I couldn't shake. For years, I'd told myself that one day they'd change, that deep down, they still saw me as their son, not a pawn. But that illusion was gone. Every lie they'd told, every mask they'd worn, every performance they'd staged, it all came crashing down. And I realized something brutal. I couldn't fix people who didn't think they were broken. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in hand. I'd rewritten my message to them a dozen times. I didn't want it to sound angry, but I also wasn't going to beg anymore. Finally, I typed, "I love you both, but I can't be a character in your story anymore. I'm choosing peace, not approval." Then I hit send. It was terrifyingly quiet after that. I blocked their numbers, muted their emails, and deleted every family group chat that used to dictate my life. When I told Maya, she didn't celebrate. She just hugged me, whispering, "You finally did it." But that night, I barely slept. Cutting them off felt like cutting off a part of myself, the obedient version they'd built, the one that had spent 29 years chasing validation. The next few weeks were strange. My life was quieter, calmer, but sometimes the silence hurt more than the shouting ever did. There were moments I'd catch myself drafting messages. I'd never send small updates, like, "We moved into the new place," or "Maya got a promotion." Then I'd stop, realizing they didn't deserve to be part of those milestones. It took time. But I started to feel something I hadn't in years. Ownership. Of my choices, my love, my life. Still, somewhere deep inside, I knew karma had its way of balancing things. And soon, I'd watch their perfect world start to unravel, without me lifting a single finger. It started with whispers, the same way their campaign against me had. A former employee of my father's company reached out to me online. "I thought you should know," the message began. "Your dad's firm is under audit. Something about missing funds and false donations." I didn't reply right away, but my heart pounded in my chest. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same charitable foundation, where they'd paraded their morality, was now being investigated for fraud. Within weeks, their empire of perfection began to crumble. The same community that once idolized them started asking questions. People who'd applauded their speeches about family integrity were suddenly gossiping about tax evasion. fake receipts, and mismanaged charity funds. The invitations stopped coming. Their social media posts, once filled with comments of admiration, were now flooded with silence, or worse, speculation. I didn't gloat. I couldn't. There was a time when I would have rushed to defend them, to fix the damage, to protect the family name. But now, I just watched, detached, quiet, almost mournful. It felt like watching a tower I'd helped build slowly fall apart, brick by brick dot. Then one afternoon, my cousin Amir sent me another message, a photo from a recent charity event. My mother sat alone at a half-empty table, her expression distant, her usual perfect hair undone. My father wasn't beside her. According to Amir, he'd resigned from his firm for health reasons. The irony was almost cruel. They had sacrificed everything, even their dignity, to look powerful. And now, stripped of it, they were just human. I thought I'd feel joy, maybe even revenge. But instead, I felt a deep, quiet ache, the kind that comes from realizing that justice doesn't always feel triumphant. Their empire hadn't collapsed because of me. It collapsed because, without me, there was no one left to hold up the illusion. Months passed, and for the first time in my adult life, peace didn't feel like guilt. It felt like breathing. Maya and I moved into a small house on the edge of the city with creaky floors and sunlight that spilled through the windows every morning. There were no family expectations here, no forced smiles or curated conversations, just quiet laughter, shared meals, and the slow, healing rhythm of an ordinary life. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about them, wondering if they ever looked back with regret, or if they'd rewritten the story in their minds again, making me the villain to protect their pride. Then I'd stop myself. Healing, I realized, isn't about waiting for an apology. It's about learning to stop bleeding for people who keep reopening the wound. One evening, I got a message from Amir. "Your mom's been asking about you. She says they want to make things right." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The old version of me, the obedient son, would have driven straight to their house, desperate for reconciliation. But I wasn't that person anymore. I simply replied, "Tell her I wish them peace, but I've already found mine." I didn't send it to hurt them. I sent it because it was true. That night, sitting on the porch with Maya's head on my shoulder, I finally understood what freedom really meant. It wasn't rebellion or revenge or proving them wrong. It was choosing myself without apology. I used to think family was about obedience, but now I know it's about respect. And the moment you stop begging for it, you start to build something far stronger, a life that's finally your own. I didn't destroy their image. They did that themselves. All I did was stop pretending it was real.